Tariffs are now going to start affecting the Japanese market, and here's everything that you need to know about that. Now, I know what you're thinking. Tariffs went into effect back in April. Why is it just now starting to affect it? Well, there were some things that kind of allowed people to skirt around the tariffs so that you, the customer, and then we, the business, didn't actually have to pay them, and that revolved around what was known as the de minimis rule. So to keep it as simple as possible, if you ordered anything below $800, it was not subject to tariffs. So I, as a business, could order from Japan, and as long as the shipment was under $800, I didn't have to pay the tariffs. That 15 to 18% did not take into effect, and that's what the de minimis rule was about. De minimis, basically just if it is under this amount, the tariffs don't apply. And so for shops like me who were only ordering maybe 12 to 20 boxes at a time, you could keep it below that $800 amount, the barrier, and then you didn't have to pay the tariffs, so then you were able to keep your products still pretty low. You weren't paying that extra 15%. The customers didn't have to pay the extra 15% from what you were end up charging. So it all worked out. However, problem is now that de minimis rule just went away. So with the de minimis rule no longer in existence, there is no longer a threshold. It does not matter if you order something for $10 from Japan, you are now paying an 18.5% tariff across the board. And this affects everybody. This also affects things like eBay. And if you are buying from Japanese websites directly, you, the customer, are still going to end up paying that tariff. So even though you won't see that 18% in your eBay order, let's say you buy a single booster box, let's say $100, make it simple. If you buy a $100 booster box, you are not going to see the tariff in your eBay charge. However, you will then get a bill from either FedEx or DHL or UPS, whoever is the shipping company. You will get a bill for that 18.5% of the value of that box. So now there is no way to avoid tariffs anymore. And I know that eBay has some warnings for people if you are doing international shipping. It tells you like, hey, you will get a bill later down the road for the tariffs, but I do expect this is going to surprise a lot of people at first. If you are somebody who's used to buying a Japanese booster box from the Japanese sellers, with that first time that bill shows up, it's going to be a surprise to you. You're going to get hit with that 18% and it's probably going to feel pretty bad. If you're buying from an English seller, you're going to notice that the prices of the English stuff is going to start going up because we, the businesses, are the ones who are going to pay that tariff, that 18%. So then we have to charge our profit margin on top of whatever the 18% extra that we are now paying is going to be. This is obviously a pretty substantial change, and your first thought is probably going to be, okay, well now the prices of Japanese are going to go way up. There's a couple ways that this could go, and I'll talk about kind of how I expect and what I feel. Right off the bat, obviously, the price of the Japanese, any new shipments is going to go up 18.5%. That's just across the board the way that it's going to go. So whatever you're used to seeing price-wise, expect about an 18% increase on top of that. Now, I expect that the price that the Japanese sellers are charging will actually go down roughly a proportional amount to that 18% increase. So why do I say that? Typically, the appeal of the Japanese booster boxes and the Japanese booster cards is that they are way cheaper than the English. It's a lot easier to collect because if you are somebody who can't afford to pay, $200 for a box, you can get Japanese boxes for typically it's around 30 to 50% of what the English is. That's where they sit around. If the price of Japanese gets to the point where it's even close to the English, there's no longer the appeal for the Japanese unless you are just specifically someone who only wants to collect Japanese. If that appeal goes away, if the price discrepancy is not enough to convince people to buy the Japanese will stop selling as well. If the Japanese stop selling as well, the sellers in Japan obviously will be making less money. So in order to compensate to keep their sales at the high, a level they wanted to keep it at, I expect that they would then drop their prices in order to kind of offset what that tariff increase has taken away from their sales. Japanese sellers work the same as any other seller. They sell at whatever the most that they can get based off the demand. So if the demand is super, super high, they raise their prices. They're getting stuff for Japanese MSRP, and then they are selling it to the rest of the world based off of the demand. And that's why the prices go up and down for the Japanese boxes. It's kind of based off of how many sales they're doing, how much inventory they have in stock. So let's just say the demand for Japanese gets cut in half because of this 18% increase. The price is too close between Japanese and English. People just don't want to buy the Japanese. They'd rather have the English if they're going to end up spending that much money anyway. So if the demand goes down by 50%, they all of a sudden are going to be making way less money because they're just not making the sales anymore. In order to compensate for that, what you do is you lower your prices. I mean, this is basic supply and demand, how it works. So if they lower their prices, even though the price change for us currently, you wouldn't really see a difference. The way that it would end up working out is you just wouldn't see a price increase. I think there's going to be like an immediate price increase, and then there will be an adjustment for the market. The prices will go back down because the Japanese sellers are going to lower their prices, and then the tariff offset is going to kind of put it back around where they're at right now. And again, that's just kind of my expectation. That's what I believe is going to happen. But I am far from an expert, and it is very possible that the prices just go up 18.5%, and that's just where it stays for as long as we have the tariffs and no de minimis rule. But just based off what I'm seeing as a business, a lot of people have actually moved over to buying Japanese prior to this change because the price of English had gotten so high that the only way that they could collect on a frequent basis was if they bought at the Japanese prices. So if the Japanese prices then also become prohibitive, then the Japanese sales are going to disappear. This de minimis rule is going to essentially, in my, from what I think, is going to take away the appeal of the Japanese. They're going to, once that tariff kicks in, the price difference is just not going to be enough for people to not want to just go for the English. And some people will just be priced out of the hobby just entirely. If they couldn't afford English, they might not be afford Japanese now, and then they'll just kind of stop collecting. All in all of these things I do think points to Japanese sellers lowering their prices in order to offset to keep their sales going. This is my very uninformed and certainly not expert opinion. So if I'm wrong, please let me know in the comments right down below why I'm wrong and why I don't understand supply and demand and all that stuff. But this is also a video that's very important for you guys to understand the de minimis rule because like I said, I do think there are going to be a lot of people who end up getting kind of hosed the first time they buy from like eBay. Specifically eBay, I think is going to be a problem because a lot of people are used to just kind of buying like a single box from Japan and not having to pay the tariffs. Now all of a sudden you're going to get hit with an 18.5% bill from FedEx before they'll deliver your product, and you're going to, why am I paying an extra 20 bucks now for this box? Well, that's why. So again, the de minimis rule is gone. Any purchases from Japan are going to be 18.5% that you will not see on the bill. It will show up later, unless you're buying from Japanese or English sellers, because then we've already factored in the price. So the English prices will look a lot higher than what you see on Japan or on eBay, but it's going to even out once that 18.5% bill hits. But like I said, if I am way off, please let me know. And if you think that I'm correct with how the market will kind of adjust and the prices will end up kind of settling back down to offset that, just leave a comment down below. What are your thoughts? Appreciate you guys watching all the way through the video. Thank you so much for your support. Thank you to all the subscribers. The comments and the likes really do help, so I appreciate you guys continuing to send those through. And I'll see you guys in the next video.